G'day, ajmahari here. Welcome to the channel or welcome back to the channel. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please do and hit the notification bell. Why people with borderline personality disorder diagnosed aren't narcissists. Because narcissists have narcissistic personality disorder and borderlines have borderline personality disorder. Now, about 40% of people diagnosed with BPD can have some comorbidity with NPD. That doesn't mean they have both personality disorders. Maybe some people do. Maybe some have a lot, BPD, and then they have, several traits of NPD, varying different amounts of traits of NPD. But what I want to stress here is 60% of people with BPD do not have comorbidity with NPD. And it's only 1.2% of all women diagnosed with borderline personality disorder that actually, according to studies, I've seen this, it's in a study. It's only 1.2% of all women diagnosed with BPD that studies suggest may have 1.2% comorbidity with 1.2% of all women diagnosed with BPD may have some comorbidity with antisocial personality disorder. Did you know that people with antisocial personality disorder aren't all psychopaths? That diagnosis by itself. They're not all sociopaths, my least favorite word in the world because it's redundant and ridiculous by itself. And people with BPD are not, most of them are not sociopathic. So 1.2% of all women diagnosed with BPD, studies say, might have antisocial personality disorder comorbid. That's 1.2%. And for men, it's 1.8, 1.9. It's still under 2% of all males with BPD have antisocial personality disorder comorbid with borderline personality disorder. It is that infinitesimal, means some people, but it's not like 30, 40, 50% or anything like that. So we do have people out there who are just suffering from borderline personality disorder. They need help and therapy and recovery for borderline personality disorder, which is highly treatable if only more people would go and do the many, many years of actual treatment and hard work that could bring them recovery, because they're not about to age out either. So let's get to the comment now. I'm going to have more comment on this because too many people out there are saying borderlines are narcissists. They're the same. They're not. They're two separate diagnoses with some overlap, with a lot of differences, and not every borderline does everything for the same reason that every narcissist does whatever they do. And borderlines aren't after supply. Narcissists are. There are differences. So it's important to remember that, because a lot of people are listening to a lot of people saying a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. Not in every single person with BPD's case. And so you might really be getting a misinformed opinion of what you've been going through with somebody with BPD who is not a narcissist. Too many YouTubers now, too many people all across the internet are just writing, talking, whatever. Borderlines are narcissists. Borderlines are failed narcissists. No, they're not. And I know where Backnin got that from, but it's really not the appropriate interpretation of Otto Kernberg. So this commenter left a comment on a video I did, BPD relationship breakups, complexity, and how to let go. And the commenter says, my ex started more narcissistic, but later on seemed to turn more borderline. It doesn't work that way. That's what you perceived. That's what you think. But do you really know that? Because it doesn't work that way. They don't start off more narcissistic or having narcissistic personality disorder, and then all of a sudden they have borderline personality disorder, or vice versa. It doesn't work that way. So if they're diagnosed, that's going to matter. If they're not diagnosed, then you're just guessing. And I would suggest you guess carefully, much more carefully. So I don't know why this person says that their ex started more narcissistic, but later on seem to turn more borderline. You can see some of the more nuanced overlaps between borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, not in every single person with either disorder, but you can see some of those things, or they can present as confusing sometimes when you might not understand borderline personality disorder enough to know that there's pathological narcissism and the narcissistic defenses in borderline personality disorder, just not to the same degree, strength as in narcissists. There is a difference, but there's an overlap of sorts. Commenter continues that the first month she had a more flat effect. You could have a narcissist with a flat effect, or a borderline with a flat effect, or a person on the autism spectrum with a flat effect who doesn't have BPD or NPD. So a flat affect doesn't mean necessarily they started off more narcissistic. That's a really interesting misinterpretation. She was very superficial in her roller coaster emotions. Well, roller coaster emotions, superficial, hard to say, because usually what they're going through inside is way, way more than superficial. But maybe that's all you kind of were ever shown, saw, perceived, knew about. I don't know. But rarely showing vulnerability, constantly behind that grandiose, self-confident mask. Interesting. Most people with BPD don't have a very effective, grandiose, self-confident mask. Yes, an overcompensatory defense mechanism strategy that they don't think about all day, but like repetition compulsions. Can they appear to be like they think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, people with BPD? Yeah, they can. And it's overcompensatory defensive strategy for how bad they feel. They feel like they're no good. They feel bad. They feel really shamed. They don't have a self, okay? They're living through a false self. They definitely can be doing all kinds of things to not look vulnerable or be vulnerable or seem vulnerable or show any emotions in a vulnerable way. That's not just narcissists. That's some people with BPD, and especially when they feel a need to defend themselves for whatever the trigger is or whatever the reason might be. Is it a grandiose self-confidence mask, though, in overcompensatory BPD? That doesn't usually hold too long. You might see that for short periods of time here and there, but that doesn't mean they're a narcissist. So again, if they're not diagnosed, you don't know. They don't know. I couldn't tell you. But they don't just flip-flop back and forth between being borderline 1 minute and narcissistic the next. It's not that simple. With this grandiose self-confident mask, as the commenter describes it, which is probably not really accurate, putting me down frequently and very easily angered. But then later, after I attempted to end our relationship, it seems she switched. Now, interesting word choice, because switched from what to what? It seems maybe she was dysregulated, or it seems maybe like she was not as defended because you threatened to leave, and so she felt abandoned. So she would have felt like you were threatening abandonment. She would have been feeling abandoned, and that can make any person with BPD who's acting out or defending as all that suddenly, take a different approach out of fear of abandonment. So she switched, whatever that means, okay? It's an overused word that is inaccurate in this area. She would cry a lot more, told me that's how she'd been her whole life, depressed and crying. She showed a lot of insecurity and fear of abandonment and appeared to turn that shame, blame towards herself, I guess, and then have ideation. She was in so much pain, it's so confusing because I often don't hear other people with this experience of their partner seemingly switching personality. She wasn't switching personality. That's the personality the fear of abandonment, the insecurity, the vulnerability, the crying, the being depressed, the being in a lot of pain, her fear of abandonment, that's not a switch in personality. That is a falling down of the borderline defensive mask, not some narcissistic, grandiose mask. So she wasn't switching personality. How would you know you didn't? Didn't seem like you really knew her before you saw this part, right? This is a part of her. When I left her, I felt guilt because this last version of her, with all her suffering, is the image I took with me, and I felt awful about ending the relationship. Why? You needed to take care of yourself. And as you're describing this person, I think erroneously, they didn't start out narcissistic and end up borderline. Sounds like they have borderline personality disorder. But they definitely were very protective at times, very overcompensatory with defenses, and they were blaming you and treating you poorly, and they definitely weren't open, right? They couldn't have any mutual reciprocal relationship. So I hope you've been working on why you're feeling guilty. It sounds like you probably have some codependency there that you could use to heal. You needed to end the relationship. So what's to feel guilty for, really? I wonder why you do feel guilty. Can you relate to this commenter? Do you feel guilty because you ended a relationship with a borderline because it was super not good for you? And the commenter says, now it appears she has returned to her narcissistic self. No. And I got that scorched earth text, and I'm permanently split black. Am I missing something here, or is this really possible? No, what's not possible is a switching personality, and so she switched. Doesn't mean anything. What do you mean by it? Because you don't know what you're talking about. Does she have a diagnosis or doesn't she have a diagnosis? If it's borderline personality disorder, it's borderline personality disorder. When you say, am I missing something here, or is this really possible? What's possible is what you described that you saw, but not the way you described it, in my humble opinion, and that she has probably BPD, and that it wasn't going to work out, and that she wasn't treating you well. And now you said it appears she's returned, not to her narcissistic self, to her defended borderline self. And you got a scorched earth text. Yeah, because this is what they do. They're abandoned. They feel like young children. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to cope. They're going to get you. They're going to punish you. You will get a scorched earth text more often than not, unfortunately. And you're permanently split black. Well, it doesn't mean she went back and forth between a narcissist and a borderline. It just sounds like a person with borderline personality disorder who can be more defended at times, and it comes across differently. And then showed you that more, she cried a lot, that she says is how she'd been her whole life, depressed and crying, showed a lot of insecurity, fear of abandonment, and was at one point turning the shame and blame onto herself, and had S-ideation. Well, it sounds like somebody with borderline personality disorder. And when they go into the valleys and the dysregulated emotion, and they can be real about what they feel for certain periods of time, then they can't cope with it anymore. Then they slam down some harder defenses. It doesn't make them, they are narcissistic defenses, but within borderline personality disorder. And it doesn't make them narcissists. Doesn't make her a narcissist. So if you said, am I missing something here, or is this really possible because of your back and forth between the BPD and the NPD? No, I don't think you have that correct at all. I think you're misinterpreting what she did, and that she could have done all of that with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. So I think it's really important for people to realize that people do have a primary diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And 60% of them are not going to have comorbid NPD. And only 1.2% of all women diagnosed with BPD may be comorbid with ASPD. And about less than 2% of men, so a little bit more than the 1.2% of all women with BPD, about approximately 1.8% of men This is in one study. Because they're all different numbers, they're all different statistics, and nobody proves anything. There's a lot of people out there that have borderline personality disorder. They may have an anxiety disorder, they may have depression, they may have some other comorbidity like that, but they don't all have comorbidity with anything else in cluster B. And to think that they all do is just reductionist and ridiculous, because they're not all the same. 256 symptom combinations that no one person with BPD will ever have. And because they can be harder, or like this person said, she had a grandiose, self-confident mask on. No, it's an overcompensatory borderline trying to act better than and act impervious and untouchable and like she can't be hurt. It's got nothing to do with borderlines switching into narcissists, switching back to borderlines. So no, that part's not right. You'd probably be best to just think about that in terms of it being BPD, unless there's any diagnosis to the contrary. So I'm going to have more coming on this because, all over the internet, people are lazy. All over the internet, people believe everything Backman says, Borderlines are failed narcissists. No, they're not. No, they're not. They have the trauma and the wounding and whatever else is involved in causation. It doesn't even matter, because the prognosis for BPD, if people just go and get assessed and treated, is amazing. People can really change and grow and heal, and we know that now. This idea that people, like there are some people with BPD comorbid NPD. So that's a little bit different than just somebody with borderline personality disorder and maybe depression, anxiety, or something like that going on. So there's that, and then there's people with BPD, and the odd person might have pure BPD, which Dr. Fox coined that term. It's basically when they don't have anything else comorbid, essentially at all, but specifically within cluster B. So the other thing is that, and then there's narcissists, and they're not all the same. Not all narcissists are the same. Not all borderlines are the same. Borderlines aren't narcissists ipso facto. No, they're not. Are there some that are comorbidly both? Yes. Are they exactly the same as a narcissist? Nope. They're a mixture of BPD and NPD. Maybe not an equal mixture. Maybe one primary diagnosis and traits of the other. I like to delineate and maintain accuracy, no matter how many YouTubers with how many hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're good information, some of them, but they're good clickbait titles, and they cut corners, and they'll sell you anything. Like, there's a YouTuber out there, she's quite popular, but she's got generic channel growth, unlike Burgess over there buying all her subscribers, and buying viewers, and playing games, where they're fluffing stuff information. But so this other YouTuber with a really big channel, but she earned it, unlike the other one. She did one, and she was talking about the comorbidity between ASPD and BPD in women. And in that whole video, she only said two things that would even be traits of ASPD. And she had read the same study that I've read, and because, I found that out. Bottom line is, she read the 1.2% of all borderlines that are diagnosed with BPD that's what the study says, may have comorbid ASPD. That's all that's known out there. It isn't rocket science. It isn't science. It's pseudoscience. It isn't proven. It just hasn't been backed up or retested or the same results found. And she went ahead and did that video claiming that every point she made was about ASPD, BPD comorbidity in women, when every point she made except two, it was all about BPD. But she titled it the way she wanted to. She got all the views in the world for it, which I'm sure I wouldn't get even if I used the same title. So the point being that I don't believe in cutting those corners. When I read in a study it says 1.2% of all females with BPD may have ASPD comorbid, that's what it is right now, and we don't even know that. And again, males, it's just under 2. 60% of people with borderline personality disorder do not have any comorbidity with narcissistic personality disorder. Borderlines are not narcissists. They don't switch personality disorders. They don't even have a personality to switch. Do not mix up borderline personality disorder with dissociative identity disorder, which has been proven to be more factitious than almost anything out there, including a famous case was found to be fraudulent. So if you think that you're with somebody with BPD, like the commenter said, pretty much that's what you need to follow, because the more you try to interchange and switch up and use all these other words and listen to all those imprecise people or just misinforming people out there, how's that going to help you? And you need to take care of yourself. And if you can relate to this commenter, and if you feel guilty after ending the relationship with the borderline, etc., no matter what it is they did to you, well, you need to work with somebody. I'm out here to work with those of you I resonate with, because you need to heal the codependency. You need to find out about your childhood or teen woundedness, what was happening in your family of origin, how did you get there, how are you going to break that trauma bond.